This week, we talk about anti-Semitic comments. We talk about AOC, the cure for HIV, and a little bit more on some political presidential politics. This is Matt Field, and this is Ditch Your Political Party podcast. So, as far as quantity goes, there wasn't tons that happened this week. However, there are a lot of notable portions that I'd like to get to. The House passed a resolution yesterday against anti-Semitic comments and also other types of discrimination. But more poignant are the anti-Semitic comments. And the reason for that is over the past several weeks, and more specifically within this past week, Ilhan Omar has essentially been anti-Jew 100% of the time. And it's pretty clear, it's pretty obvious. People on the left and right side of the aisle are in agreement to this, which is pretty unusual. There are some that don't obviously get as much screen time as some of the others. But the fact of the matter is Representative Omar has been not the best candidate or the best representative right now as far as what she says and what she does on the anti-Semitic side of things. Now, when you apply the logic in this case, if you were to do this in the extreme and everybody was anti-Semitic, then we'd obviously have a huge issue on our hands because it only benefits one particular. It only benefits one or maybe two parties, and it's obviously the expense of another, which is how we like to base things. We're all about the logic. We want you to get rid of your political party and think critically. And in this particular situation, if you are one of those that have heard these different things about Ilhan Omar and you've stood behind her, then you are listening to the shoulder devil on your shoulder of your party, and you're not thinking clearly. Anyone that listens to what she has said would conclude that it was wrong and she shouldn't be doing it. In fact, AOC called her out on saying things that were anti-Semitic, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but then she turns around and supports her. So, again, another one of those moments where I'm like, I have no idea where she was, how she was elected. But that's the case with a lot of different people. There are really, really contradicting elements of several candidates in Congress. So anyway, there's this whole play and this whole issue of what's been happening in this anti-Semitic realm, and now the House has passed a resolution. I don't know how much good it'll do, honestly, because even Nancy Pelosi the other day, the House leader, she was saying that she doesn't believe that Ilhan Omar, what she said was ill-intended, or she understood what she was saying. I think that's absurd. At what point do we start taking people at their word? We start saying that what they said is actually what they meant, as opposed to the way they want to politically construe it? Again, this is another one of those situations where you think critically. You just use your logic. If it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, then it probably is a duck. We don't need to justify this duck into actually being a donkey, whatever. So that's kind of the situation. That's the political situation right now as far as that goes, and how that's affected the remaining, the presidential candidates has been pretty. They haven't necessarily gone full force behind it, but they also haven't really denounced it. They haven't really done anything about it. And Edmund Burke said that the only way for evil to succeed is when good people do nothing. So, that begins to that's a little bit telling to me. Those that are running the race, and they haven't said anything to condemn these comments, is kind of, it's not a huge badge of failure or anything, but it begins to show you what kind of people they are, and if they're unwilling to say what's bad is bad, then begins to question their moral character and their ability to make the decisions when they're faced with them themselves. It kind of goes back to the whole Jussie Smollett thing, right? Jussie Smollett was he made it all up. Everything that he did, he made it up. And as soon as that happened, even though there was little evidence of anything, those on the left jumped on board and they said, yeah, this is what happened. This was a hate crime. It was terrible, 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 terrible. Right? But as soon as Ilhan Omar comes along and says something anti-Semitic, then they tiptoe around it. I mean, these are literally back to back. They're so close that if you're thinking logically, you'll say, oh, well, that's weird. That's a huge double standard that those on the left are placing. And again, it's not just those on the left. There are others that have done similar things that aren't necessarily attributed to any particular party. And I don't. The only reason I pull out parties and I talk about the left and the right is because that's pretty much all that sits in Congress. And when you look at that scale, you're either more to the left or you're more to the right. It's difficult to be entirely centrist. But in any case, that's besides the point. So the funny thing is Ilhan Omar is calling out all these sort of things, and then Bernie Sanders is trying to play up his Jewish background. Because he's trying to look as though he is in some sort of intersectional coalition that doesn't really exist for him. Because the people he's running against are within, demographically, it plays well for them. And that shouldn't be a factor at all when you're determining who is going to be your president. If you voted for Barack Obama because he was black, that's a terrible reason to vote for him. If you voted for him because you believed he would bring unity, now that's a pretty good reason. Though he didn't. And it's the same sort of thing with this. If you're looking at these candidates because they're a woman, because they're of a particular race, then you're just fooling yourselves. There's no reason to vote for somebody based on the way they look. It's based on the way they act and what they have done in their past. And that's what brings me back again to AOC. She's defending her Green New Deal most recently. And it's really silly, and it's really, again, the logic doesn't fall together, but she's who she is. But before that, I'm just going to talk quickly about our excess supply list partners. If you're a business and you have inventory of a product or component or ingredient or whatever else, these little parts that you use to make up some larger product, and you need to liquidate some of that inventory to get cash in your pocket so you can begin to invest effectively in your business, then excess supply is where you need to go. This is where, if you are battling with surplus or excess inventory, you can use excess supply list and it'll put the balance back in your favor. Excess supply list is where you can list any excess inventory you have of anything for free. Go to excesssupply.com, click on publish your ad for free, and get it done. You literally have nothing to lose. So go to excesssupply.com, list your excess for surplus supply, your excess or surplus supply, and get cash back in your pocket. Excesssupply.com, again, excesssupply.com. Okay, so this is AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's defending her Green New Deal, as we talked about this last little while. Sorry, calls. She's defending her Green New Deal, and her defense is a little bit hilarious last week, saying that, hey, I'm the boss here. If you don't have anything to say, then don't say it. If you don't have a plan, then you can't say anything about mine. And it all comes back to what we were talking about before, the amount of, is global warming that big of a crisis? And I wanted to make note on that real quick. I've talked about a little more generally as to what's happened, but I have a little bit more of the facts. There's some scientists that run a site called Skeptic Science, and they're talking about how much of a crisis this global warming is. And the weird thing is, if you look at the past 10,000 years, okay, so right now I'm talking 10,000 years, okay, and what a lot of those advocates for global warming are looking at the last 100 years or so. So over the last 10,000 years, most of it was warmer than it is now. Even if the warming were as big as the IPCC imagines, that is the basically it's the institute that's been advocating for global warming and has created models and doing all these different things. So even if it's as big as they imagine, it would not be as dangerous as they believe, as a man, as they think. Mr. Brown, who is a scientist, says, after all, recent research suggests that 9,100 years of the past 10,500 years were warmer than the present by up to 3 degrees Celsius. And when they talk about rising degrees in Celsius wise, we're talking like, tenths of degrees. Okay, and we are far from 3 degrees Celsius. And again, it kind of just comes back to the whole idea that why are they pushing the global warming objective? I'm not entirely sure. I don't understand what the drive is behind it, outside, some ulterior motives, a way to get funding. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is when you look at the data here, if you're looking at the past 10,000 years compared to 100, you're going to have a much better idea as to what's happening. And it's been much, much more than it is today than it was back then. 3 degrees Celsius is, 7, 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're far from being anywhere near there, and all these different things that people are talking about, the advocates for global warming just don't exist. So AOC's argument is that if you don't have a plan, then you just keep your mouth shut type thing. And my plan would be is we don't really need to do anything at all. I think there's nothing wrong with us advocating for people to, companies and people to be cleaner in their use of energy. But I would honestly leave that to them. And companies, if there really is a market for it, then they'll pursue it. I think that's what Tesla's done. I think that's what Toyota's done. There's a lot of companies, they use hybrid models. They see that there's a trend. They see that there's something there, and we continue year after year, the United States, that decrease the amount of emissions that they've used. And it's just going to continue that trend because that's the way the public looks at it, and that's fine. So I don't think there's any serious issue. It exists, yes. Global warming does exist, but I don't think it's anywhere near a crisis. The whole issue with with Ilhan Omar is closer to a crisis than anything like this. And the people coming across the border who have drugs and are traffickers and all that sort of thing is a greater crisis than that of global warming. So, I hate to break it to Bernie Sanders or AOC, but those are the facts. They say you're a science denier if you say that global warming doesn't exist. I think like I said, global warming exists, but it's not as serious as they portray it to be. Based on the original projections too, if you look back when Al Gore was promoting it, we should be underwater by now, and I think I've mentioned that before. So it's nothing to be worried about. I think it's good to be conscious. We should do things that aren't going to cause pollution. And so as we continue to move that direction, I think if anything, the government will provide some sort of incentive that would help the public in general. But I don't think we need to be imposing any different types of laws to accomplish that. Anyway, so we're talking about her big deal, and when she was running for office, this is AOC, her big green deal, and she wants to get rid of all cars, and she wants to get rid of planes, and she wants to institute the train. The weird thing is, even though this plan is basically the cornerstone of what she's doing right now, and she wanted to be the first one out there to say that the Green New Deal is the biggest thing out there. She, when she was running for office, and all these different things, in fact, where she lives now, she has used Uber, who she condemned earlier on 149 times during her campaign, and she used about $30,000 in gas when the subway is only 1 minute away from her headquarters, and not to mention, I believe, by her house as well. And instead of she could have used Amtrak from where she lives to get over to DC and different places, but she decided to use a plane. So it's anecdotal. Obviously, it doesn't really matter that much on either side that she used a plane or that she used gas. I don't care that she did. I don't think it matters. But the fact that she's advocating for removing all cars and getting rid of planes is a silly, obviously very silly narrative. And if she believes that so much, then why is she using these different things? So just goes to show that this is just a political stunt. She's just trying to be in front of she loves, honestly, I just think she's someone that just loves to be in the public eye. She loves the attention. I mean, the things that she does, I mean, the open-ended her open-ended Facebook live discussions are just whatever. I mean, they don't hit any particular issue with any logical force. It's just a bunch of hearsay and banter and blah blah. I mean, basically. So she just says silly things all the time. She takes things out of context. She goes, again, I don't know what's going on over there, but if she is your representative, I don't know why you voted her in, but you need to think much more critically. Otherwise, you're going to continue to get AOCs in office, and the entire world is going to go to pot. I mean, just to be honest with you, because she's not. They talk about Trump, them trying to employ the insanity plea through the Constitution on Trump. If there's anyone that's closer to that, it's AOC than Trump. All right, I don't know how you voted for her. So, again, our whole push here is we're not Democrat, we're not Republican, we're not independent, we're not anything. We are the logisticians here in the world, and we want you to, coin the term, and we want you to think critically whenever you're voting for anybody, whether that be a Democrat or a Republican or whatever. If their plans don't make sense and what they've supported in the past don't make sense, then don't vote for them. Don't put them in office. So, anyway, so let's go on to some good news. There is some good news in the world today. There's something new on HIV. Before I go into that whole thing, I want to make mention of autoimmune health and nutrition. Okay, if you are looking to overcome, I was looking up the other day and I learned that there are something around 50 to 60 million people that suffer from autoimmune diseases in the nation. I mean, that's crazy. What is it? We're 300 million right now. So we're looking at 20% of people in the United States suffer from autoimmune diseases and or symptoms. And so oftentimes we don't entirely recognize it. But as you eat and you notice, discomfort from eating this, your stomach bothers you or your body begins to ache or whatever the case may be, then that could very much be a flare. Autoimmune health and nutrition is based around the idea of the central diets of the autoimmune paleo diet and this specific carbohydrate diet. And their products comply to that. The idea is that they remove the inflammation foods cause inflammation in your body. Like cocoa will cause inflammation in your body. Different types of gums that are put into supplements will cause inflammation in your body. And if you're not aware of this, you could actually be causing these different issues to your body without even knowing it. So what autoimmune health and nutrition has done is they have created products that comply to these autoimmune based type diets so that you can overcome these symptoms naturally rather than popping pill after pill after pill. Now they're not FDA wise. They don't claim any cure. They don't claim any of these sort of things. But it is a start to begin to overcome things. Don't go and buy a product and not take your meds. That's up for your doctor to decide. But this is a way for you to begin to heal yourself holistically. The funny thing is 100 years ago, when they started having these new types of pills coming out, they'd say, take this pill and do this, and you'll see these results. Now, but before then, they said, eat this plant, do this, and now we've gone back to eat this plant, eat this herb, whatever, and you'll help overcome. So it's funny how things have gone, and I mean, there's the modern medicine still has its place, but there's still great knowledge that exists under this autoimmune health and nutrition. So, autoimmune health and nutrition started when a sister educated a brother and a brother helped a sister. Their line of 100% compliant paleo, keto, SCD, and AIP proteins are number one on the market. They are the cleanest option available and taste great. Go to primalhn.com or autoimmunehn.com and use promo code DYPP at checkout to get 20% off your entire order. If you are tired of the conventional way of healing, let Autoimmune Health and Nutrition help you along the holistic path. Go to primalhn.com or autoimmunehn.com and use DYPP at checkout. Again, autoimmunehn.com and use DYPP for 20% off your entire purchase. So, talking about diseases, let's talk about a disease that has killed people in the tens of thousands, maybe more, particularly in places like Africa, HIV. So HIV is basically the disease that attacks your, another autoimmune disease, but it attacks your immune system, and then it goes into full-blown AIDS. And once you are diagnosed with AIDS, you basically have, maybe a year or so to live. It's a pretty terrible disease, and at some point long ago, someone had overcome HIV by doing certain types of treatment, but they weren't able to duplicate it. Most recently, they were able to duplicate this for the first time. So the second person was able to overcome HIV by doing a particular treatment. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it was in the UK. But I mean, a huge step forward for those that are suffering from diseases like this, because not only is this going to help those in the HIV community, but also it's going to help other types of medicine move forward in whatever different things that they put together, the different cures. So big news there, and we're excited to see where that goes. So there's a few extra items that I want to hit before I'm done today. First, let's hit Trump and kind of what's happening with this DNC. So Trump recently, he spoke at CPAC, and he kind of just went on a rant. He went on a rant for 2+ hours, or around 2 hours, and it was just crazy. It was all of Trump from every spectrum. He said some really good things. He said some really dumb things. He said some really funny things. He said a lot of things. Okay, and he talks about his executive power and how the Democrats are going to use it anyway. If he does, it doesn't matter. Basically, his logic is I use it, doesn't matter because the Democrats are going to use it. And I think that's terrible logic. You shouldn't be. Anytime you are violating the Constitution and using executive power for that which it should not be used, then it's just not. First off, it's not going to stand because the next president can come in and just overturn it. And secondly, you have to use. Basically, you have to use the right channels to make this work. And the president isn't the most powerful person in the world. Okay, our legislative branch, honestly, is where it lies, because that's where all of our representatives go. That's where all of our senators go, and that's where they're able to determine the different laws that need to be passed in the country. And side note, not only all the laws that need to be passed, but also, why can't we repeal a bunch of laws and get rid of a bunch of things? I mean, I don't know why we've decided to put shackles around ourselves constantly as we've gone throughout the years, but that's where it takes place. The president essentially doesn't have all that much power. The only time he's granted power that is similar to that of a king is during times of crisis, and that's very well defined. And what he's doing here with the wall, I don't believe is, based on some of the information that's been coming through, they might be able to begin to justify it as a crisis. But he signed the bill, and it kind of prevented him from doing that. So I don't know. He's not in a good position there, and it's too bad because I believe that we do need the wall. Again, I've used the same comparison with my home. When applied to the extreme, it doesn't matter if one person came through and broke into my home or onto my property. I would have a fence up. Right? It's the same sort of thing here. And what we're talking about is terrible, terrible stuff. I mean, we're talking about some really disgusting things as far as trafficking goes, and the use of children to basically as their ticket across the border for gangs. The laws are so obscure. So, if you don't like the wall, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But if you're going to take that stance, make sure you have a logical stance. Because if you're well aware of all the terrible things that are coming across the border, then you would be advocate for something, at least something that would prevent these different things from happening. And so far, as far as I can tell, people are just listening to the shoulder devil on their from their political party, and they're just doing whatever they tell them to do, and they support whatever they tell them to support. Again, it comes back to the Jussie Smollett thing. I mean, that is just like 100% what that shoulder devil does. It's like, as soon as you see something that supports your narrative, you jump on board and you do whatever you can to make sure that is actually true. And it's weird, after it all happened, people were sad that it wasn't true. That's such a weird thing. Such a weird thing. So, I mean, again, it's a matter of using your head. Do not listen to your political leaders. Listen to your own logic, listen to your own brain, and start doing what you have to do. So, Donald Trump, so that was kind of a dumb thing that President Trump did, but he did do something that was a little more, was kind of pushing the consequence on the DNC. The DNC said that they will not be holding any of the debates with Fox News, which is obviously a right-leaning publication, which is dumb. I mean, when they did the Republican primaries, they didn't do the same thing. So it's kind of, anyway, so it's kind of the same sort of thing. And so Trump fired back and said, well, if you're not going to do that, I'm not going to let any of the left-leaning programs host any of the debates. And so, it's kind of funny how he hit back at him. And I imagine that they'll walk it back at some point, or they'll allow Fox News to do a debate here or there. But it's just weird. I mean, if we're really focusing on what we're able to accomplish as a nation in our political realm, then we're not going to be all caught up about these silly little things. I mean, who cares who's hosting? I mean, yeah, is Fox News a right-leaning publication? Yeah. Well, not publication, but news outlet. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. They can still host something. It's the same thing that happened with all these other programs that hosted the Republican debates. It doesn't matter. So, silly stuff coming from the DNC there. And they should just fix it. Just say, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's hosting the debate. Just get it hosted, get people to watch it. And honestly, if you really want to push a good agenda and you want to get in front of as many people as you can, then do it. You got to do it at Fox. I mean, they still have there's a huge viewership. So I think it's silly. So if you're really trying to reach those people, then you need to get up on Fox News too. So again, it's counterproductive. It doesn't make any sense, especially when it comes to really getting your information out there. So I'm going to hit one last thing, and I say this, I'm going to be brief just because it makes my stomach churn. So we talk, I don't know if you've ever heard of the halo effect, but basically it's the idea that if you're good at one thing, then people automatically believe that you're good at a bunch of other things, which is obviously not true. I believe I'm good at some things, but it doesn't mean I can go play professional baseball or basketball or whatever the case may be. Just because I'm good at a few different things, maybe in business or other things like that, does not make me a professional everywhere else. And I think most people would agree, particularly since I'm not this huge celebrity. But that unfortunately applied for some when it came to Michael Jackson, which is a terrible situation. There was inklings as to whether or not he had done inappropriate things with children, and turns out that he had. There's plenty of evidence to support that. And the most disgusting thing about it is when this was breaking a bit more, the people that are in charge of the Michael Jackson quote-unquote brand, they didn't want it to come out because they didn't want it to affect the brand. Now, talk about money mongrels right there. If a man is guilty of pedophilia, then, as I'm going to quote some scripture, then he should just have, I don't remember exactly the verse, but they basically hang a millstone about their neck and sink into the bottom of the sea. I mean, what a terrible thing that you could possibly do, and it's disgusting. And anyone that does it, I mean, you hear some people that talk about those that rape or kill, that between the two of them, they should have the same punishment. And in my opinion, this is the worst of the worst. Okay, it'd be better if he had not even been born, if this is what he did. And there's some pretty graphic stuff out there. I do not encourage you going to look at it, but maybe that's just because I'm super sensitive on the topic, you know, and who wouldn't be? I mean, it's just a terrible thing. People should not be defending him. Nobody should be defending Mr. Jackson, even though he's passed. Whatever, it does not matter. This man was terrible, and he should not have any praise of anybody when he does something like this. It was the same thing with Bill Cosby, right? But you know, he was. I loved Bill Cosby, but now I don't even want to watch his stuff anymore. Now that I know what he's done to women, but I mean, Michael Jackson's worse. I mean, he did it with. Just makes me sick. Anyways, so there you go. That's your news for the week. There is. I don't know if there's really anything else you need to focus on outside the fact that you know, really fight those shoulder angels, because the shoulder angel and devil, because they often will tell you to do what your political leaders are telling you to do, and you have to think independently for yourself. As soon as you decide to let others decide what you're thinking, then it's a mob mentality. You know, it's the same thing with about 100 things that have happened over these past few weeks. And as soon as one of these Republicans or Democratic leaders stand up and say, hey, this is bad, or this is... Don't just say, oh, don't take their word for it. Oh, okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I think that's stupid. No, you need to go back and you need to think about it critically and determine what it is that you should do in order to more effectively deal with this in your own neighborhood, deal with this in your life, whatever it is, and do the right thing, more so than just, you know, fighting for your party, fighting for your team. Because, like I said, then it's just the mob mentality, and nothing is actually effective at that point. So, last of all, I'm going to make a small announcement. We have Utah is the 18th state to join the Convention of States. I talked about this last week. I've been talking about it the last little while, and essentially this gives us the opportunity to pass legislation, not necessarily legislation, but amendments to allow us to, you know, set things like term limits on the people in Congress, which it would be so valuable. Talk about draining the swamp. I'm 100% on board with that. That's one of the first things you need to do anyway to make some real change. So if you're really tired, I mean, if you look at the approval rating of Congress anyway, it's down. I mean, it should be in the negatives, if you ask me. But it's well under 20% a lot of the time. And because of that, I mean, who wouldn't sign up for this? So if you haven't signed it yet, go to conventionstate.com, I believe it is, or just Google Convention of States, and you should be able to land on it appropriately. But I'm happy to say that Utah joined it, my state, and I'm hopeful that it will continue in this. I believe 3.8 to 4 million people have signed it, but much more needed in order for this to actually take effect. In order to actually pass an amendment, you have to have 38 states. So 18th state, we still got 20 states to go. Still a long ways to go. So go and halfway there, you know, but, well, sort of. So if there's anything you can promote something like that, go for that. Go sign up, get it done. And if you need to contact your state rep, then go do that too. Because that's what's going to help make change in the country, is by going through the people to create these amendments that are going to tie the hands of our legislators who have gone buck wild. Because let me remind you that, again, we are currently in debt at $22 trillion, and we have unfunded liabilities of $210 trillion plus. There's no way they're going to be able to do that with an income of $3.4 trillion every year. It's complete and utter ludicrousy. All right, so we need to get this done. We need to get this nailed down, because otherwise we will default, and whichever country holds the most of those bonds, the most of that money, most of that debt, they will rule. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. So we got to keep our heads down. If there's any way that the United States is going to be taken over, it's through the financial mismanagement of our money. So there you go. This is Matt Field with Ditch Political Party Podcast. like us, subscribe to us, tell your friends. Let's make this a movement. All right, thanks, guys.